Welcome to The Brooklyn with Pooch and Colin. My name is Colin Helwig. We are here tonight recording a special episode for the 2026 NBA Draft. We're just a few hours removed away from Brooklyn's selection of Mikel Brown Jr. The Nets, they also took Joshua Jefferson with the 28th overall pick, which they acquired just this week alongside Julius Randle for our old pal, Nick Claxton. Guys, I know this week always gets a little crazy this time of year, but I really don't think anyone had this on their bingo card, expected all this to unfold from Monday evening on. But, here we are, nevertheless. So we're going to talk through it all. And joining me today, friend of the pod, Sharif Phillips-Keaton of NetsWire via the USA Today Network. Sharif, my friend, happy NBA offseason. You were at the draft last night, tonight there for round two. What did you gather? What kind of reaction did you see from the players, media, any team execs, just kind of chatter when the Mikel pick came in?
Well, first, Colin, it's great to be on here talking to you again. And off season's long. I almost forgot what the regular season was like. But honestly, I'm gonna make this sound as exciting as possible. But it was kind of like, oh yeah, they got their guy because the first five picks pretty much went as projected. Once the Clippers took Wagler with the fifth pick, it was like, okay, it's kind of what everybody's been theorizing. It's either are they taking Darius Acuff or are they taking Mikel? And then they went with Mikel. And I mean, you didn't really. This was the opposite of last year when they took Yegor, and you heard like audible like gasp of like, oh, this is a surprise. Like we weren't expecting this, but then Mikel gets taken, and you didn't really see much reaction. It was just like, okay, solid pick. It makes sense. Um, that's the gist I got from like reading the room and seeing like different players and people reacting to it in real time.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you were there. I know Lucas was there for us at Nets Daily. I was camped out in Lower Manhattan. A few reps a few days ago from Reebok reached out to me and invited me to Darius Acuff and Nate Ament's draft party. And I figured, I could go there. There's a good shot one of those two guys will be picked, and I'll be able to talk to them, chop it up for a little bit. But obviously that did not happen. And Pooch actually texted me, and he was like, "Sorry, man, sorry it didn't work out." And I was like, honestly, like maybe it was not the most productive night for me on draft night as a journalist, but I was happy with the pick. So very similar deal. I think some of that PTSD kind of crept in from last year, where not that you know I don't want to start this pod by saying Jaeger was a bad pick or anything, but it was an unexpected pick. And there were, like you said, there were gasps. And I don't think anyone gasped probably isn't the reaction you want. You want to have, immediate cheers. So it was nice to not have that. But I'm curious, looking at your analysis, how you've looked at these prospects kind of leading up to it. What was your opinion on the pick? And Mikel, do you think this was the right one, or this could be something Brooklyn regrets?
Um, I'll be honest. I'm going to preface my answer by also taking into account, a lot of people seem to have criticized the Nets for not taking Acuff when he was there, especially because most outlets, people around the industry had them taking Acuff, and it makes sense. If he was there with the sixth pick, why not take him? But, when you understand that behind the scenes, they had already met with Mikel twice, once for a workout. And then obviously, technically, they met three times if you count at the combine. But obviously, at the combine, these guys meet with pretty much every team because all the teams have reps there. Um, and it made sense, especially when I was at I guess you could say the pre-draft interviews on Monday, and you could just tell by the way Mikel talked about his meetings with the Nets. It was like if they didn't pick him, it probably would have been a surprise to us us like beat writers that were there because of like how glowingly he talked about meeting with Jordy, meeting with Sean, everybody within the Nets brass. But I don't think they'll regret it. Obviously, you know, the way that things go with this draft is you'll always project certain guys to be great and they'll be bad, certain guys to be bad and they'll be great, and most players will probably be around in the middle of like what we project them to be. But when you look at Mikel's profile, just a guy that can, he went off for I think like 41 points in a game as a freshman playing like high level college basketball. but he also dealt with a back injury. So I mean, it it could go either way, but I'm a believer in his talent. And even if like Acuff is the guy that people think he can be, that offensive engine kind of guy, you couldn't honestly go wrong with either guy. That's kind of how I look at it. And Michael probably fits more of what the Nets are looking for, that positional size, multi-dimensional kind of guy as far as like scoring and playmaking. So honestly, I think the they made a good choice of a few players they could have picked. But I honestly think Michael was probably the best way to go, given everything that happened leading up until now.
Yeah, yeah, I'm on the same page, and we had the no ceilings guy. So I've spoken with a few of them, but we had Corey Tulaba on the show a couple months ago, and right around a month ago, and he said, like I think Nets fans should dream about Mikel Brown, and he watched film with them. He had a lot of good things to say, and I'm very open and honest about this, like because college basketball season happens at the same time as the NBA, and you know how it is for us where we're locked in on Brooklyn. We don't have as much time to watch film on these guys, so it's not so much. I think you're better off trusting what these experts say than trying to cram for a test in the final 2 weeks and learn everything about, like, you're welcome to it. It's a fun thing to do, but I trust what Corey told us, and he said Michael was the pick, as long as any of the top four guys didn't fall back, and they did that. And I think the people who are criticizing the Nets for not taking a cuff are the same people who criticize the Nets for cutting Cam Thomas. Now, I'm not saying Acuff is Cam Thomas 2.0. I think he's got a way better demeanor than Cam Thomas seemed to have. He's way more athletic, going to be a better player. I'll say that right now. However, it's the kind of thing that the dialogue is the words you keep hearing is box office. Stephen A said it this morning. I believe some folks at CBS Sports or SNY said it. Box office means what exactly? Exciting? It's telling me you see the ball go through the hoop and you get excited. You don't pay attention to the intangibles that are being valued around the league, like passing, be able to play defense, positional size. So, I would encourage, listen to no ceilings, listen to the people who, concentrate on this, not the people who clearly don't know what's going on with the Nets, don't really pay attention and, just want to be a mouthpiece.
Right. I and like okay. What I will say is I can understand people criticizing the pick because one of the main criticisms I've seen from either the Nets fan base or people adjacent to it is that it seems like if there's not that every team has a consensus big board, but let's say if there was, the Nets seem to never choose the next best available guy. That's the criticism. I don't think that's again necessarily true because every team has a different big board, but um I it's funny because if they took Acuff, I'd probably have the same take I had today. Like, oh yeah, Acuff's a good player. I like what his profile is supposed to be. As much as we can say we like the way Yegor looked last season, at least from terms of his shooting and what he might grow into, point guard is still a hole in this team, especially with the way. Unless you want to say, Nolan is that guy, but I don't know if that's set in stone, especially now that they've taken Michael. But yeah, I think if they had chose either guy, it would have been a good pick. And personally, for what the Nets ethos is, what they're trying to go for as far as like no one really being an outlier in terms of like being the smallest player on the court or maybe not being able to be a reliable shooter or reliable passer. Michael seems to fit all of those things. And obviously, you hope he fills out physically so he can be a better defender because that's still a criticism of his, similar to Acuff. But Michael, I think Michael might be a sleeper with the way people are talking about him compared to Acuff. That's like my personal opinion.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And there's totally a world where, and I think Brian Windhorst said, this was a pivotal two picks. There's totally a world where Acuff becomes a superstar and it doesn't work out for Michael. But I just think that the dialogue immediately after a draft, you can never be too definitive one way or another. But you hinted at Nolan Traore and Ben Soroff. I want to look at Michael's fit on the team now. Do you think that this pick reflects poorly on either of those guys in any way at all?
Well, so I'm gonna put this out there. I'm a little biased. I'm actually a fan of Nolan Traore. I get the gist that most aren't, and I can understand that. It's not like he had a productive season. I just like his the idea of him if he can like you know get more touch on his floater, maybe be a more reliable shooter. I mean, I think you have a player there. I think when it comes to Ben, this doesn't look good for him because I mean, even if you consider last season, he was already behind Yegor and Nolan as far as like that point guard duties situation. Now you throw Mikel in there. The way I see it right now, training camp will obviously give us a better picture. Yegor is probably going to be it'd probably be like Yegor and Drake being like the two. Um, Mikel or Nolan starting, and whoever's not starting is the backup. Then you have Ben as like the third point guard. And like on this team, the third point guard doesn't really play that much. And Ben already didn't play that much last year when most of the players were healthy. So honestly, I think this Michael pick basically means Ben has to show significant growth in training camp, or he might be in the G League the majority of the year.
Yeah, you can consider me part of the Traore fan club as well. Especially, I was really impressed with how he covered the most distance. I think a lot of people last year from where he was at the beginning of the season to how he got to the end of the season. I don't think the pick really reflects poorly on either of those two guys. Just to bring it back to the question, the Nets were not a good team last year. And when you're not a good team, you don't draft for fit, you draft for talent. And there were all these fantastic guards here. And we've seen this before. There's been plenty of teams where you have a, I mean, there's a different scenario, but it's just top of mind right now. Giannis and Bam play the same position. Yeah, maybe Bam is more of a center, but you know what I mean. Like they put them together. Like you get the talent, and then you trust your coach and you trust your team building to make it work beyond that. And I think you're right. In the depth chart, Sharaf is going to have some ground to make up. But at the same time, I don't even think that totally reflects poorly on him because he was a bottom back of the first end draft pick, and Michael was the sixth overall pick. I think the Nets when they took Ben, with those picks are usually their reach isn't the right word because it is the back end of the draft, but it's a guy where you don't quite know what he's going to be, but you like the ceiling. And that's the same position he's in right now, where, he played a little bit last year. You still don't know what he's going to be. And if he turns out to, really take a huge leap and challenge for more minutes, then awesome. But if not, that's kind of what these picks are. So I'm sure it'll be, a fun training camp battle as they're all younger. But, this is how you kind of want it. You have Michael, who is drafted six overall. He's drafted to be the star. 19. I think that's where I don't know if 19 was Drake or if he was 22, but middle to back end, you find your backup region, and then end of the first round, that's where you get your guys where maybe this guy can turn into something. And I think all those guys are on that level right now, so it kind of just makes sense.
Right. And I agree with you. And I guess to answer the question directly, yeah, I don't think this reflects poorly on either guy. Because at the end of the day, the Nets, when they accumulated all these first round picks, they knew at some point, even if someone was good enough to say be in a rotation for every team. I'm not saying Ben is necessarily there yet. He obviously has a lot of growing to do, but him being the third point guard, let's just say that's what happens, doesn't mean they took Michael because they don't think Ben could be a backup guard. I just think it's like basically what you said. You're trying to get the most talent, and no matter who you took, if you took just throwing names out there. If you took Nate Met, then maybe we're having a conversation about Noah Clowney. Like it's just because you're trying to get as much talent as possible and then figure it out. That's how you go through a rebuild. And I think that's what the Nets did with the Mike Hill pick.
Bingo. Yeah. So I want to move on to their other pick. Joshua Jefferson got him at 28. I don't know how familiar you are with Iowa State, his game, but what do you like about him that you've seen thus far in the last 24ish hours?
Um, well, with his game, Joshua seems like that kind of big physical forward that doesn't like he doesn't really operate in the post that much. like he can, but his game is more like, hey, I might shoot a hook there. Other play, I might set somebody up with a backdoor on a backdoor cut. Like he seems like that kind of big guy that doesn't play like a big guy. If anything, when we talked to him last night after he was drafted, he even though he was talking about forwards that have like ball skills, Julius Randle, Draymond Green, he kept saying guard, big guard, big guard. So I think if anything, that's kind of like his. If you had to say, hey, describe this guy's game in 2 words, big guard. That's Joshua Jefferson. That's gonna be cool to see, especially with you saw last year with Nick and Dayron. Jordy likes the bigger players to still be able to move the ball or do something in some way other than just like set picks and roll to the rim.
Yeah. Yeah, when I saw it, I watched a little bit of his tape last night and I was like, this is such a Brooklyn Nets Jordy Fernandez pick for all the reasons you just said. I mean, last year everyone accused them of taking 5 guards, even though Danny Wolf is literally like 7 feet tall. But what they did is they took guys with all guard skills, no matter what their size are. Like Yegor kind of used them. Has more of a forward frame. They kind of used him more off ball last year, but guard skills, like he has that passing prowess. We saw plenty of super flashy passes out of Danny Wolf last year. Say what you want about his finishing around the rim, but the dude has, a court vision that you can't teach. And it really seems like Jefferson has this too. And, it took me a while. I originally was not a fan of the Nets draft last year, and I'm still not sold, but, I could see the thesis in that we want to be a connective team where everyone can handle the rock to a certain degree. Everyone can, stretch the floor or is at least going to be a willing shooter. And everyone can pass, and he seems to really fit in that that exact system like that. So I think this was a good pick. And the Nets for years have, no matter whether they're the contending Nets or the tanking Nets of lore or whatever the team is now, they haven't had been a great physical rebounding team. And with Julius Randle and Jeffries and Dayron Sharp, who has been a ferocious rebounder, I think the front court's going to be looking a lot beefier than we've seen in years before, which should be a welcome sight.
Yeah, that's definitely what that's why I was saying this last night to different people I was talking to. The Julius Randle trade almost didn't seem real because the common joke was like, there's a bunch of 6'10" skinny guys on this team, and then there's like Dayron Sharp, and then you just basically add Julius Randle and now Joshua Jefferson, and it's like, oh, this team doesn't seem as tall and skinny as it used to be. So that is actually a cool thing that happened over the past few days.
Yeah, man, I want to get into the Randall trade. What was your immediate reaction when you saw it? And then if you're going to slap a grade on it, what would you give the deal?
So first off, and I want people to understand, I was up all day and you know, I was getting ready to go to bed around 11. I think the Shams tweets came around like 10:30. So my
Yeah.
first thought was, come on, Shams, you couldn't save this for like 8 a.m. tomorrow morning or something. But after that, um, honestly, I'll give the grade first. I give the Nets a B for the entire trade, and then the reason is because part of my reaction was like, wait, so the Nets are getting Julius Randle. They moved up 5 spots. So they got the 28 pick. Minnesota got the 33rd pick. And then Nick Claxton is going to the Bulls. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, there must be like details that are going to get added in at some point. And then it was like, so I'm staying up longer than I thought because I'm waiting to see the Shams tweet like, yeah, the Nets threw in like 2 second-round picks or another player or something. It was just no, that was the deal. They
Yeah.
got Julius Randle, the 28th pick. All they had to give up was 33rd, and then obviously the Bulls got Nick Claxton. I'm like, honestly, I mean, you use the salary cap space to get more talent, and you technically got more draft capital, but you just got better draft capital. I give him a B. I have no issues with it, even if Julius Randle isn't a long term fit. Which I mean, he's 31, so probably not. But like, even if he's here for 2 years, if he can be the Julius Randle he was the last 2 years, I mean, I think that's a win for the Nets all the way around.
Yeah, I agree. I actually went as far as to give it an A minus. I just think Julius Randle, like the term I keep hearing is floor raising, and that's exactly what the Nets want to do this year. They are not going to be able to tank next year. Tanking might not even be a thing next year. We got to see how it shakes out with the new rules. Uh, but he's immediately the, I guess there's an argument for Michael Porter Jr., but he's just a tier above Nick Claxton, and you're only paying about 50 million more dollars for him. I think that's a great deal. It's a great use of your cap space. He does so many things. He can do so many things for you. He can handle the rock. He can shoot. He can play defense when he wants to. He's got a great frame, and all you did, you gave up Nick Claxton, who it felt like he was just there too long. We'll get into. I want to give him a proper salute and a farewell, which we'll do after this, but. You didn't really see like a future with him with the team. He didn't always seem to be there, like mentally when they were playing. And Day'Ron Sharpe, it really just it has felt like his time. It feels like his time more than ever. This just seems like a great move roster wise, future outlook wise, and you're right. Like he's probably not going to be the Nets. Probably are not going to if somehow they win a championship and this rebuild goes how they want, where they're contending in I don't know 5 6 years. It's probably unlikely that Julius Randle's going to be there. However, we literally just saw it with the Knicks. You don't do all that in one off season. You got to build, and you get a little bit better, and maybe you attract more, and then you trade Julius Randle for whoever the next Karl Anthony Towns is. You know what I mean? And you go from there. So I really think they couldn't have done a better job really with the situation in terms of the money and they got another pick out of it. I think this is as close as you can get to a home run.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think a lot of people were like, oh, because I know when we throw out the term salary dump, it's implying that the team who's taking on that player is going out of their way to get them or something like that. But when you look at someone like Randall, I mean, he's obviously more expensive than Nick's contract per year, but he's only under contract for the next 2 years. Next year is a player option, and depending where his value is at, he'll probably pick that up. But let's say you go into next season, he's the 1A or 1B, whoever between him and MPJ, and they raise each other's value. Who knows? Maybe you can trade Randall for more than what Minnesota got for him. And then maybe MPJ is still your guy to like whether he's the best option or second best option. Maybe he's still around, and then maybe you have another nice young player. Like you kind of just have to play this stuff out, and it sucks to take on salary dumps because of the connotation around the word. But I mean, the Nets have cap space, and they probably weren't really gonna go all out and sign someone like Austin Reeves. So do what you did last year. Take on Terrence Mann. You'll get a first round pick, and then hopefully you hope you make the right choice. This year you take on Julius Randle, and you hope he is still, the player he was in Minnesota, and then maybe Joshua Jefferson is better than people think, and then you're just building on that value. That's all you can really do in these rebuilds.
Yeah, I saw this and I was like, this is literally like Damari Carroll in like 2016. He was an aging player who was getting overpaid, and again, you brought it up like salary dump has this negative connotation, but if you have money to spend, sometimes whatever you're dumping, it's worth to pay for. And when Damari Carroll was making $20 million a year in 2015 or whatever, 20 million was a lot more back then, and the Nets. They took him on and they got a draft pick and started him and played him. And you know what? He had his best year of his career in Brooklyn, helped raise the floor. The next year, he helped get that team to the playoffs. If they got that out of Julius, and Julius Randle's a much better player than Damari Carroll ever was. We're talking about, I think he's a 3-time All Star, 2-time All NBA. If they can get anything like that, then that's exactly why you make this kind of deal.
Right. That I agree with you there. I think it's excuse me. I think it's yeah, it's you take on Randall, and like you said, Randall, and he's not too far removed from being an All NBA kind of player.
No,
Now, is he going to be that with the Nets, even if he's good? No.
yeah,
Excuse me, but
yeah.
um, if he's like last year, he put up like what 21, 8 and 5 or something like that. If he could do that, and maybe the Nets win 30 games, so maybe you're still in that relegation zone, which I mean, you don't have your pick, so it doesn't matter. But let's say they challenge for the play in. I mean, that's a successful season. And then you just hope that maybe Randall boosts his trade value, MPJ, maybe he makes the All Star game for the first time. And then you're kind of seeing what Mikel, Yegor, guys like that are doing. And then, you know, but these are the kind of steps you have to take.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's 100% a step in the right direction. The guy who's now taken a step elsewhere, though, is Nick Claxton. He was the longest tenured Brooklyn Net, which isn't saying much, but nevertheless, he was kind of the veteran leader on the team last year. And, every fan base has, I feel like, that kind of young, low floor, high ceiling player. You don't really know what he's going to be, but, you really like to rally behind him. The diehard fans really fall in love with him, and it was great to see Nick be that, especially really blossom from that 2021, 22, 23 couple seasons where he was challenging for defensive player of the year, and I think it's a travesty that he did not at least get first or second team all defensive, but it was crazy. He saw the rise and fall of a team. He was there before. I think he signed his after he was drafted a week before Katie and Kyrie signed, and he saw that team get built up. He saw the big three come aboard, tear down Ben Simmons, the twins. He saw it all. He's going to be a great guest to have on a documentary if they ever make one about what the hell has happened to the Nets from 2016 to 2026. But I think it was time. I'm curious what your thoughts are concluding his time as a Net and his exit and on his way to Chicago.
Yeah, man. First, I had a great time covering Nick. I guess what is this? My just finished my third year covering the team full time. Nick's always been, great with the media. Always
Yeah,
had good conversations. Um, yeah, and I've seen this from people like Lucas and people waxing poetic about uh, Nick and what he's been through with this franchise. I'm just hoping he's happy, and you know, it looked like for a while, like you said, there were just moments he was checking out, and I don't think it was intentional, but for someone of his caliber, he already saw what it was like to compete for a playoff spot, compete for a championship, and you know, he did what a professional does. He saw the direction the franchise was going in, and he said, "You know what? I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm just going to do my job, still be in shape, all those things." But Chicago is in a similar spot to the Nets, but maybe he'll get more of an opportunity to be that number two guy next to Josh Giddey, or I guess depending on how Caleb Wilson factors into that. But he gave his all for Brooklyn. I think that's how I would like to remember Dick. I think he was just a good guy. He grew a lot from his rookie year until last year, and yeah, it sucks that he couldn't stay here, but sometimes it's just how it goes.
Yeah. I want to echo what you said, especially about, him and how he interacted with us and the media. Always a great quote, always, super respectful talking to myself and all you guys. So thank him for that. And yeah, it's I certainly hope he kind of gets that spark back. I don't blame him for, maybe not being his best. I think that's got to be a really hard thing to do to, you're a young player and you're immediately thrown into the playoffs and competitiveness. And then when you're at probably what's supposed to be the physical peak, you're on a team that's tanking. That's got to be tough. So I'll be rooting for him out in Chicago. And yeah, take care, Nick. We will see you soon. I hope he gets some cheers when he's back in the Barclays Center.
Yeah, I don't think whenever the Bulls come to town, he should just only get cheers. I hope the video of his time here, all that. I think he was that kind of guy, and I mean, I don't think the fans should have any reason to not remember him fondly. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just hoping that's the case as well.
Finally, we'll have a video that feels 100% deserved for a guy. I know that's always been kind of controversial. People were making fun of Brooklyn for Blake Griffin and KD, but yeah, no, the Clax one will definitely have some good moments. 6 years he was here, I believe.
Yeah, and you know, KD and Blake aside, it's kind of tough when it's like, hey, you were only here like 3 years, 2 years, and and then there's all this talk about the whole video thing is starting to lose its luster when we're doing it for guys. But Nick's well deserved. I'll put that out there. His will be well deserved.
Awesome. All right, Sharif, we're gonna do our five out, five rapid fire questions to close us out. First one I got for you: true or false? The Nets will make the playoffs either through the plan or organically this coming year. Putting you right on the spot, my
False.
friend.
False.
Yeah, I really wanted to say true when I was thinking about it this morning, but then I was like, there's young teams in the East. The Raptors are going to be better. Cavs are running it back. Celtics are going to be better. Pistons are going to be better. Knicks are going to be good. I still don't think the East is quite the dog that the West is, but I think they'll make the plan. I will give them that.
Yeah, that was I was initially gonna say true because then when you said they're either gonna make it through the play in or outright, and I'm like, I mean, could they be the 10th seed and then just like be the end up being the 8th seed and getting probably swept by whoever is the 1 seed? Sure, but you know what? Yeah, I'm sticking with false. They could. I just yeah, I don't see them making the playoffs. So that's really why I'm going false.
All good. I won't fight you there. Realistic free agent target you want the team to pursue the most in the coming weeks.
Realistic free agent target.
Mine's
Ooh.
LeBron.
Yours is
Joking.
LeBron. Oh, okay.
I'm joking.
You had me there. Um, just off the guys, honestly, I think I could see them going after someone like Peyton Watson. I know he's not exactly a free agent because he's more on the restricted side, and that depends on if they even put out an offer sheet. But like realistic free agents are, yeah, I'd say like Peyton Watson. I don't think he'll cost as much as some of the guys that are like reasonably available. Um, because even if you think like I've seen some people say like Jalen Duren, I mean Duren's going to cost a max contract, and I don't think the Nets
Yeah.
are going to do that. So yeah, I'd say like Peyton Watson.
Yeah. I'm looking through the list right now. I don't have one prepared, but I'll just say, or what, Dayron has an option. He'll be back in. You know what? Fuck it. LeBron James.
Well, I'll say at least LeBron at least could be realistic because they just gave Austin Reeves the max contract, and let's say LeBron wants to make sure he's playing in New York 41 times a year. Realistic may not be the word, but at least it's more viable than it was a few hours ago. Because Austin Reeves is on a golf course now, and they might not be able to pay LeBron. So, but I mean, he'll probably go to Cleveland. But yeah, let's just go. Let's say LeBron. We can go with LeBron.
It's gonna make a ludicrous social clip. Will Dayron Sharp last as Brooklyn's starting center?
Oof, that's a. I'll say yes. I'm a believer in Dayron, and again, I put this out there every time. I could be biased because I cover the guy and I've seen him grow, but I think he could be a starter in this league. And I mean, it wasn't. I think it was what last offseason. There were rumors that there were teams like the Pacers who needed
Yeah,
anybody to play center,
the
and they
Lakers too.
chose Jay
Yeah,
Huff. The Lakers, like he could be a starter in this league. Last is an interesting word. I think he'll be good. I would like to see what he actually looks like with his minutes scaled up because he's never played more than 17 minutes a game. But we got a few times of him starting this past year, and he looked really good. So I think he'll last.
yeah, I think he'll last too. And I mean, for this season, I think it's kind of a given that he'll last. When I originally framed this, I was like, with the Nets, could it get so bad that they want to trade? But I think even though the Nets are going to try to compete this year, they still want to compete with the young talent at the center of that core. And so I think, he's going to be given the keys this year. And, if it doesn't go well, and, we know that like Dayron's not the greatest rim protector, and, he might give Jordy Fernandez some headaches on that side of the ball. But I think this is going to be his year to give it a try, and, maybe they look at another young big like that 2 years from now if it doesn't work out. But, it's a whole year to go through. And I don't see a world where the Nets are immediately going to be like, oh, we need to start like Danny Wolf is starting over you, or we need to trade for someone because we're trying to. You only do that if you're trying to win like a title, and I think
Right.
can all agree the Nets aren't there yet.
Yeah, I don't. I think as long now, I will say, do I think the Nets are done adding center depth? No, I'm pretty sure they're going to probably add somebody because it's pretty much Dayron and Danny Wolf.
Yeah,
And I mean, granted, last year they did have a two center rotation, but that was of two. I guess if you want to say prototypical centers. But Danny's not really a prototypical center, so I could see them going after a center, but it'll be Dayron Sharp's job, and then they're basically looking for someone to share the backup duties with Danny, basically.
yeah. No, I agree with that. I think we'll get something along the lines of like an Ed Davis, Jared Allen situation, back in 2016, where, you have that veteran big there because, Dayron's still young, Danny's young. So, kind of be that vet and, eat some of those minutes off the bench. But yeah, it really seems like I think Scotto actually reported, our colleague, either in an article this morning or yesterday, that, the Nets are excited and, that they plan to, start Dayron at center. So, we'll be watching for that. Last one I got for you, Sharif. When's the last time you think Nets fans were this excited about the team? Bar is low. Let's call it as it is. But
Yeah.
I'm curious.
It based off reading the landscape, it feels like it's been at least a few years because I want to say when Katie was traded away, and they received Mikel and CJ, and then they technically made a playoff run, but that's because that KD led team had already won enough games. Um, but I also think that was probably like the beginning of the end. So I would probably say when they traded KD, but like you still had the okay, they're gonna make the playoffs kind of thing. So that's probably the last time I think the fan base was like really excited, or at least somewhat excited. But like you said, the bar is pretty low.
Yeah, I was really pinpointing that time too when Mikhail was averaging, 27, and it's kind of a similar position now where it's like you kind of acknowledge like we're this. I don't want to say we're in the gutter because the Nets are not in the gutter. They're in a solid spot for a rebuilding team, but you're not contending. You're not really close to contending, but you're cooking with something. Something could be there, and I think that's kind of like how it felt when they traded their stars away, Katie and Kyrie. I think the thought of a title disappeared when that happened, but you had this guy Mikal Bridges averaging 27 points per game, playing great. Claxton was still young and fresh off one of his best season. Cam Thomas had those 3 40-point games in a row, 2 months ago. There was something there, and it feels like there's something there for Brooklyn right now, something that definitely wasn't there the last 2 seasons. So yeah, I believe that was 2023, I think. Yeah, and 2023 in the
Yes.
spring. So been almost 3 years.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I think there will be a reason to be excited about October because I really think this Mikel Brown Jr. kid is going to be legit. I just think it's, and I understand Nets fans have been asked to be patient for years at this point, but I really do think Mikel Brown is going to be one of the guys. Just got to give him time.
I agree. Yeah. Really like his game, really like his demeanor. Like where the Nets are headed. It's been a long time. They tanked for 2 years. That kind of takes a toll. And when they made the Julius Randle trade, that's not a trade. It's not a trade a championship a team that's going to make a championship right now makes, but it's not a team that a tanking team is going to make. And I think, it's going to be enjoyable for the fans. I'm sure we will enjoy it as reporters, watching a team compete. That's what professional sports teams are supposed to do. So it's things are looking up in Brooklyn. And I know we got round 2 tonight. Sharif, I want to make sure you get back on the floor for that. So I want to thank you for coming on. We appreciate your answers. Great stuff. Appreciate you taking the time. I know you've been on the pod a couple times now, so the people probably know where to find you. But for any new listeners, why don't you plug yourself away and any work you're working on too?
Yeah, you can find my all my written work at NetsWire. You could probably just type in netswire.com in Google or Bing if anyone's using that kind of search engine these days.
What a poll.
That's where you find all my written work. My Twitter, Sharif Keaton, or by same name, Sharif Phillips-Keaton, but at Sharif Keaton. I don't know which one is better to find me. That's where you'll find my tweets. Yes, I still call them tweets. They're not posts. I try to keep it mostly basketball, but it is the off season, so I'll be tweeting random things that pop in my head, some WNBA stuff. But yeah, that's where you can find my socials. Not really active on anything else, but yeah, NetsWire. Find me on Twitter. Let's get through this off season together.
You bet, my friend. Yeah, check Sharif out. Check us out. We are the Brooklyn Pod on Twitter. You're the second guest in a row to say it's Twitter, not X. So check us out on Twitter. Check us out on Instagram. We are on TikTok. You can email us at thebrooklynpod@gmail.com. We will be back with a free agency episode coming up next. We get right into that after the draft, and then we'll be in Summer League. All good things in the NBA that goes on in the next 2 months before training camp starts in August. So we're about to turn a page, Nets fans. Hopefully it's an exciting one. It already seems like it's an exciting one. So lock in. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.